Hello and welcome to the Cynic Digest, a new free weekly podcast available every Tuesday that gives you a taste of all the Celtic podcast content we are producing at thecynic.co. Thecynic.co is where you can sign up for all our extra Celtic content. We are producing on average 32 podcasts per month, and for a monthly fee you can get access to these as well as our huge back catalogue of over 2,200 podcasts. Signing up is easy and you can cancel at any time. You get access to the Cynic app, the website, and an individual RSS feed, meaning there's plenty of ways to access our content. You can also gain access through Patreon if you prefer a more tiered approach to content. Simply search for The Cynic on the Patreon website or the app. Today on the Cynic Digest, we want to give you a taste of our podcast from the week beginning Monday the 15th of January. Every Monday, we start the week with the agenda, which covers all the weekend news and action, as well as any breaking news on a Monday morning. Last week, the agenda was hosted by Graham Mackay with a panel of Alan Edgar and Colin Kearney. They discussed a number of different subjects, but here's a discussion on Kwon joining St Mirren on loan.
We're going to talk about Kwon. And I want to figure out if this guy, Kwon, is going to be a Liam Shaw or he's going to be a Christopher Ayer. Because we've sent to St Mirren and Stephen Robinson has nice things to say about him. He said, quote, he's a player that comes highly recommended. Celtic were very keen for him to come to us, which is a compliment to the coaching staff here. He's played a lot of games in South Korea and was signed by Celtic for big money. It was an area we needed to strengthen the midfield, and with Keanu away at the Asian Cup, it was important that we strengthened there. We believe that he will come in and add that strength. He breaks up play really well and he can start play really well for us as well. Lots of wells in there. I've had some good conversations with Brendan Rodgers about him. We're delighted to have him in. So my question to you, Colin, is this a case of let's get this guy out the building, or is this a case of we've brought this guy in from South Korea, we need to give him some minutes in this league to see if he can actually get up to speed? What do you reckon about this loan move?
Bit of column A, bit of column B. I mean, he came from the second tier of the Korean leagues. He obviously talked a good game. I think we've talked a good game in getting him over to St Mirren by the sounds of it. Oh, he's very, very good. Yeah, you're fitting right in. So yeah, I think it's kind of like, he's here, he's in the country, we brought him in, we have paid a bit of money, so let's actually see what he can do and see if he can improve and see if he can fulfill the promise that he seems to think he has. I think it makes sense. I think St Mirren are a team that are maybe falling away a wee bit, maybe need a wee bit of reinforcement after sort of quite a bright start. Yeah, maybe he could do well for them. As commentators are always saying, he won't be able to play against his parent club, so we don't need to fear playing against him. So yeah, I think it sounds like a good move. And if he stiffs at St Mirren, then that's your answer, and bye.
That idea of giving, basically strengthening the other teams against Rangers, Alan, that's something that we've all kind of thought about for a long time, and it doesn't seem to happen very often, but we've loaned someone to another team in the SPFL. What are your hopes for this loan move? Do you think it is, as I said to Colin, a case of getting him out of the building, or do you think it's something else?
You need to trim down that first team squad at Lennoxtown. I mean, your calendar behind you, Graham, that has 3 players in January confirms that we have far too big a squad, and there is a need to get players out the door. I think it's been mentioned, I think the manager actually mentioned it as well, that it's important. I think he briefed out that he wanted between 5 and 8 potentially out the door, so it's a start. It's a pretty decent loan for him, in fairness. I think the interesting thing will be, I know that Bacchus is away with Australia. I think he played actually on Friday or Saturday, started for Australia, and you would imagine that he'd be away for quite some time. It'll be interesting to see if Kwon is the go-to. You know, when they assess him in training, do they throw him in? Is he the direct replacement, or is he going to have to kind of earn the stripes a little bit? I don't have high expectations at all for Kwon, having seen him for 45 minutes against Bilbao. I know that people think that's a very small sample size, and it is. If you were there and you did watch it, you feel like you've seen more than enough. So good luck to him. I'm sure he'll do well. I don't expect him to be a player that comes back and makes a big impact. But again, going back to the conversation about players stagnating, there's no point in him being at Lennoxtown training every day, you know, just being part of the team if he's not going to contribute. He needs to go out and find his way. So it's good. You know, I dare say it will be quite a learning experience for him, and you know, we can keep tabs on him and see how he's getting on. But I get the impression he's not going to make a big impact at Celtic when he returns in May or June.
On Wednesday the 17th of January, Chris Gallagher was joined by Stuart Dugan on the Midweek Report. They discussed potential interest in Cameron Carter-Vickers, links to Owen Beck, and player contract lengths. We pick up here with Chris and Stuart discussing the signing of Nicholas Kuhn. Nicholas Kuhn has signed for Celtic. Celtic Football Club is delighted to announce the signing of Nicholas Kuhn on a 5.5-year contract. We'll get to length of the contract in a few minutes. Subject to international clearance, Nicholas, who can play on both the right and left wings, has been capped by Germany under 20 level, and the 24-year-old spent his early years at RB Leipzig, Ajax and Bayern Munich before moving to Rapid Vienna in 2022, where he has played regularly for the Austrian side. Brendan Rodgers went on to say, "We are delighted to welcome Nicholas to Celtic. We believe he is a dynamic player who has an excellent level of quality. And all the attributes to fit with quality to fit into our style of play. He is the profile we're looking for. He is a real attacking intent, a player with a great pace and ideas, the ability to create and score goals, and a player with a great energy and work ethic. He's someone who can play wide on both sides, so he brings with him that versatility for us too, and myself and the coaches are looking forward to working with him." Initial thoughts. This is a transfer that's kind of went on a little bit longer than we maybe hoped, but happy to get the signing over the line.
Yeah, definitely happy to get it over the line. I think that it's always exciting. I think you have to allow yourself to be excited by the signing of a new player. You can't be too cynical about these things, even though as recently as the summer, we were all excited and didn't quite go our way. But I actually think that he is the sort of profile that could improve the team. Maybe there was some folk that thought it an odd priority to go and get another winger, given how many we have. But I think you can really see that it's an area that we've struggled with just for, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, quality. He does look like a Rodgers quote-unquote player, and someone that's being bought with the design of fitting how he wants to play, which I think is a positive step. I'm not sure, you'd have to go back and look at the statements, and nobody's going to do it, but he seemed particularly effusive and quite specific about his skill set there, which I'm not really sure he was with the players in the summer. I'm pretty sure he was like, he's good. Yeah, he'll fit in right here.
In the summer, it was a lot of, the club seem to like this guy, so why the hell not? I'm in.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into that, but I think that it does seem like the sort of player that really fits his system, and I think I'm optimistic. I think you can choose to be particularly cynical about these things. Talked about it a little bit, and there's been a bit of discussion about this notion of project players and people looking at the price tag, and I think it goes both ways. If you go out and spend £8 million on a winger, yes, maybe that's a barometer of quality. We should have a drinking game, but everyone sips their tea or something.
Yeah, you'd be done if it was a drinking game, if it was a quality.
People have got work to do. Yeah, I mean, if you spent £8 million, it just comes with a lot of pressure to deliver as well. And so it's just not really the business model unless there's something like really tried and tested. I don't think Celtic are currently going to go and spend that sort of money, especially being out of Europe as well this year. At the price point, it could be a really good pickup. We'll just need to wait and see. I
was kind of thinking about this while I was away. Obviously, Celtic's always on the mind. And I was thinking about that idea of people mentioning, project player. This guy's 24 years old. He has played for big clubs, Leipzig, Ajax, and Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich, one of the biggest clubs in the world. And I know he didn't have a lot of game time overall, but he still kind of contributed there. And people using phrases like project, and I know this has been talked about on other podcasts, but I do wonder what people's expectations are in regard to what players are going to be brought in. Is it about age profile? When people throw phrases around like project, is it just because they want older players, or is it they want experienced players? You could look at someone like Christopher Ayer, who at 21 had played something like 150 games, whereas we have signed in the past 25-year-olds who've played less than that. And I'm not going to throw this to you, Stu, because it's a really hard question to kind of break down. But what do you think it is that people are looking for? Is it just age experience, or is it game experience?
Maybe it's a combination of both, but it goes both ways, where you get a player like Aaron Moy picked up for free and people are like disgusted and a sort of element of the support unwilling to give him his dues, even when he starts to kind of get up to speed and starts bossing games and becomes a really essential first team player. So people just sort of take an opinion and then they just kind of they go with it. And with regards to a young player who's played lots of games, it goes the other way with a Kieran Tierney. He's played too much football, you're ruining him. So there's always going to be something to say, and I think that the level of football that Nicholas Kuhn has played at in terms of the Austrian league, a team like Rapid Vienna, the volume of games he's played, he's very much within the sort of parameters of a player that we can sign that does have that potentially higher ceiling that could then be your next 20, 25 million pound player if he comes in and hits the league well. You know, he has been a player at big clubs, and whilst he hasn't made much of an impact in terms of first team football, I think just being around big clubs and big players and high standards, I think, is probably in his sort of DNA from his career trajectory, which maybe helps settle. We've heard a lot of players that do struggle to settle at Celtic, even players that have done well. Coming back to that blog thing from Hattati where he was talking about how it's just odd that Celtic have to win every week. And I think there's some footballers that just aren't accustomed to that.
Yeah.
They can go out and draw. But like the St Johnstone game, the 0-0 at Celtic Park earlier in the season, people were like in meltdown about that, and myself included. It was absolutely dire. And players, you must be like, what's going on? Like, it's just we drew. We didn't lose. We nearly won. Like, why are people going mad? And that's a level because it's just not acceptable here. So I think having that sort of experience of a top level club will help, even though it hasn't been. There will still be a bit of a learning curve to be part of the first team.
The Celtic Women's Football Show is our podcast that focuses on Celtic FC women. It's hosted by Claire Wilde, and every week she's joined by Lorenzo Paccitti. On Thursday the 18th of January, they looked ahead to the derby match against Rangers in the Cup. They also discussed the appointment of new Celtic manager Elena Sadiku.
My biggest fear was a complacent appointment that would have been like a men's B team coach or a men's youth coach shoved into that role. So for it to be somebody kind of handpicked, maybe not handpicked, but as intentional as a Sadiku appointment seems, somebody with a really good background in the game, playing at a high level, coaching at a high level, and with that early retirement, she had kind of unfinished business, at the top level of the game. That's all very exciting. And just based on the way she speaks and some of the points she's hit just in early conversations, she seems to really be relishing the size of the role, and she's commented on the scope of the role quite a bit. The potential that's there, which is something that we've really worried about, whether Celtic are going to hit a brick wall with the women's team and stop funding it in any way or caring about it or pushing on. And it seems like she has ideas above what we are now, and she seems to imply Celtic do as well. So that's all good stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think she feels like a character who wouldn't have taken the job unless there'd been some guarantees made about what she'd be able to do. She's come directly from the under-21s academy at Everton, so she'll have experience kind of working with the WSL side and club. But she's got, for someone, she's only 30 and her experience is enormous because, like you said, anyone who doesn't know her history, you can kind of look up her CV on Wikipedia and stuff. I would recommend, we will retweet it as well. There is a podcast that was done a couple of years ago where she goes into quite a lot of detail about how she got into coaching because she was kind of one of Sweden's up and coming young footballers, and she just had a horrific time with injury. She referred to it a bit in the press conference today. And also the fact that she moved so quickly into coaching. So she started coaching basically when she was 23. So she's 30 with 7 years under her belt, working with some really experienced coaches. She's worked in China. She's obviously worked in Sweden. She's worked in England, and now she's up here. It's when we sort of saw the appointment, and she looks really, on paper, it looks like someone who's really maybe more inexperienced, but you kind of dig a little bit deeper and you think this is someone who is at the point in their career where they've really got something to prove.
Yeah, and it's almost similar to Fran in that her CV is that of like a professional coach, somebody who's set their mind on being a coach at a young age and that their dream has been to be a coach. I think Sadiku talked today about, because, her career got cut short, she thrives and she enjoys the idea of making other players' dreams come true and helping them reach their potential. And that's the kind of thing I think that got players excited to play under Fran. And what we're trying to do is continue that momentum that he built. I don't know how I feel about a Celtic manager being my age. That's almost like a moment for me.
How do you think I feel, Lorenzo?
Well, I would still hope that I could play for Celtic at some stage, but I would be definitely, coming to the end of my peak. I could maybe captain the squad domestically at some point, but to have a manager my age is exciting. But like you say, 7 years under our belt, all over the place. like Fran, like an Ange, these are the coaches I think that maybe go under the radar a bit, that end up becoming the names because that they set their mind on. Like, these are single-minded coaches. They're trying to improve themselves. They're trying to improve the teams they're at, and they don't just take jobs that come up that suit them.
Yeah.
And I think Sadiku coming to this job, she actually talked about the places she's been in the football. She's maybe had to play with a certain squad, and then when she's been at other places, she's had a bit more freedom, and she's commented that her style of football is that more attacking style that Fran implemented, so she's happier to kind of step into this job, and maybe why she doesn't seem too phased about there being a derby coming up for her first game.
She really, by the way, does not seem phased about that, just from being in the room with her. She was just like, yep, I mean, everyone's telling me about the rivalry and everything, but I haven't experienced it. So to me, it's a semi-final and it's a game, and we go in and we play it and we try and win it, which is probably actually the best way for someone like that to come in without any of those expectations. You also, I just wanted to go back, and you mentioned about, someone like when Fran came in, the connections that he's got and the hope that we've got for kind of almost making sure that Celtic stays in that world of women's football where those connections stay alive, so that we've got the best opportunity to kind of find new players, talk about coaching, develop the way that we play. And, the interview that I referred back to there, she talks about working with Jonas Eidevall, who's now obviously doing things at Arsenal. She'll have that as well, which makes me really positive and excited.
Thursday also saw the release of the Cynic Weekly, the full podcast, which is available every Thursday on all podcast platforms. Every Friday, we record and release the Weekend Update, which covers all the news and looks ahead to the big match at the weekend. On Friday, the 19th of January, Chris Gallagher was joined by Kieran Devlin as they looked ahead to the Buckie Thistle match, but also they discussed Matt O'Reilly. Celtic would be absolutely bonkers to, even for silly money, I think, to sell Matt O'Reilly in this window. Kieran, your thoughts?
Yeah. Also, before getting on to just how daft it would be, don't sell him to a Spanish club, sell him to an English club, because he's got the homegrown factor. So we can add in a few extra £1 million on. I don't know, fans would say, what does that mean to us? Because we don't see that. We definitely don't see it reinvested in the team. But I guess just strategically, you'd want to take advantage of English clubs wanting to big up their homegrown quota with that side. But yeah, just generally, it'd be obviously be incredibly stupid. I think he's been the runaway player of the year this year, comfortably our best and most consistent player. He's been outstanding. His goals have been invaluable. His all-round play has been outstanding. And it may seem daft, given he is probably our head and shoulders above everyone else from the player of your conversation, but I still think what he does off the ball and defensively is underrated, because he's just a very complete player evolving into something quite special. You don't want to make predictions, but I think in the summer, we probably would break our transfer record for him, especially with that homegrown factor. Again, whether that's reinvesting in the team and the recruitment we do to replace him is an entirely different conversation. It would just be daft and really cripple us in the title race. And for all the many, many criticisms we have of the Celtic board, and still maintain, they will always look after Celtic's short-term interests domestically. And this is absolutely falls under that bracket. How many times do we criticise them for only buying in loanees in January just to see the title race over the line? I think Colin alluded to it on the agenda as well. This is almost the version of that. They know how important Matt O'Reilly is to this team. The qualification to the Champions League is even more valuable financially than it was the last couple of years, given just the PR and everything else of winning the title this year. I think the club, for their own sake, they just won't sell him this window. It would just be, for various reasons, be disastrous. And I think they will look after their own self-interest in the short term, and this would be critical to that.
Here's something I was thinking about. Everyone seems to, and it's a very valid point, seems to be of the opinion that Matt O'Reilly will more than likely go in the summer, which I can understand. That he will have been here for 2.5 years, and he's won the league and he's played in the Champions League. Would it be worth potentially sitting down with Matt O'Reilly and saying to him, look, give us another 6 months, leave next January and take part in the first of this new Champions League? Because what you could do is, I honestly think there's an argument to be made to say to Matt O'Reilly, here is the clubs that are after you. And I'm not sure it'll be, and I'm not saying he couldn't play for these clubs, but I'm not sure it's going to be a top 5 club in England. I'm not sure it's going to be one of those. I think it'll be maybe the clubs below, and I think he'll get a good move. But if it is clubs that aren't in the Champions League next season, I would say to him, why don't you stay with us for another 6 months? We'll bump up your wages for 6 months and leave in January, and we'll be happy for you to go in January. But what we need from you is to stay for this 6 months, play in the Champions League. It seems like we're always at the behest of the player, when in reality, we could just be like, pitch him this idea. Just say, look, you're going to go, we get that. You are only 23. You want to be part of the ultimate new kind of Champions League. Give us 6 more months. I mean, do you think that's something the club will do, or will they just simply go, cha-ching?
I think they could go to cha-ching if they get anywhere near 25 million. I think they'll bite the hand off somewhere. I don't know. But at the same time, they rejected that amount of money for Edward in 2021. Yeah, 2021. So maybe they seem to go from extremes of massively overvaluing and massively undervaluing their players, depending on what year it is. Yeah, I think you're right though. I think the worry is, okay, we keep O'Reilly this for this window, and then you get to the summer, and then you've got massive interest in O'Reilly. Hatate is probably wanting a lot of interest in himself. The stuff with CCV looks quite credible. The guy who reported it is a guy who's reported, basically, he broke the story, every piece of injury news, every piece of international call-ups and everything. So he clearly very close to CCV or to CCV's agent or something. So the fact that they're saying that says, presumably for the summer, he's just trying to build up interest. I doubt CCV would agitate for a move before the window closes. So I do think you could get into a very difficult situation if you're not careful, where Hatate, O'Reilly and CCV all badly want to move in the summer. So it's how do you work around that, but also don't get into a situation you were 3 years ago, where you had Edward, Ayer, Christie and Incham all promised moves, and every single one of them had those promised revoked by the club, who just said, actually, we need you to stay 6-12 months now. That was just awful man management. From the club, you do have, if you make a promise, you do have to keep it, and you can't just say, "Oh, actually, our recruitment is so shite that we're not sure we can replace you, so you have to stay," which is what they did before. So I think I think it's a really difficult situation. So I think what you're outlining there is a good idea. Whether it's O'Reilly or Hatate, it's really tough to lose both those guys in one window, given our recent track record with recruitment. You can't afford to lose those two guys, and CCV in the mix as well. That is like 3 of your 4 or 5 best players going in one window. That's really tough to sanction.
On Saturday, the 20th of January, we released our long-running feature podcast, The Transfer Committee. It's hosted by Christian Wolf, and with a panel of Ian Dugan and Christopher Bowd, the Transfer Committee examines and discusses the recent and current transfer windows. They look at strategy and perform player and squad analysis.
We'll talk about Owen Beck later, right? The reality of any sort of deal for Beck that's not a loan, I think you're talking £8 to £10 million for him. I don't think they're going to take less than what they bought Calvin Ramsey for. Your 8 to 10 million is essentially a 20-year-old who looked really good for 6 months with Dundee. Now, he's from Liverpool, been through the Liverpool Academy, but that's what you're getting. And then you're back in the, well, why did you not go and sign Josh Doig? But again, if you had a strategy and you knew what you were doing, you could answer these questions, but you can't, because it's really scattergun.
People are talking about, should Celtic adopt, the Porter model or the Ajax model and stuff like that. And what we kind of, I guess, we came up to is like Celtic needs to find its own model. And what we thought that would look like was quite a clear mix of bringing in projects, talents, players that can contribute in and out of the first team, but see 18 months, 2 years, they'll be firing. And the other mix of that was first team ready players, maybe a bit older. And the context of us doing that pod was that in the window before that, Ange had come in and you got players like Kyogo, Starfelt, Juranovic, even like Gigi, add to that, CCV, for example. Then the next window there, you had Maeda, Hatate, even Idiguchi. So that was kind of like, well, this is a good mix, because in that you got players like O'Reilly coming in and Abada, and there was that mix of saying like that's a good mix for Celtic. Bringing players in peak age, but also that, and you can find that with the money Celtic has, it relatively really now as well compared to the rest of Europe, you can go into a bracket of 6-7 million and buy really good players. But ever since that second transfer window under Ange, I mean, I sent you guys some overview of it, and you look at the players that come in. First of all, the age bracket has gone down, and the hit rate has gone way down as well. But it's stuff like the last 3 windows. I know we've gone through it before, but the players you brought in, like first one, Bernabei, Jens, Haksabanovic, Abelgor, Siegrist, Moy. Then the winter, Iwata, Johnston, Kobayashi, and the last window is just, there doesn't seem to be, I guess, in that clear what we thought. It comes back to the point earlier on, I guess, what we thought was, look, this is quite a coherent, first in players, younger players projects. I guess the answer just comes back to, there doesn't seem to be a plan.
No.
Or like a well thought out one.
But when you look at that summer 22 window, with the exception of Aaron Moy, Jens, you maybe get a pass on. That's a shocker.
There's been a few chats about Celtic. Why does Celtic give out 5-year contracts? It will be a lot to do about that's the maximum length of time, 5 years. You can amortize. Ian, I'm going to leave this to you because you're better with the financial. But it's essentially you can take the cost of a transfer. And if you sign, as Alan says, if you sign the player for 5 million on a 5-year contract, what that means to you actually, your profit and loss is that you can put 1 million per year in how much it costs you, and as we said, that can kind of work into financial fair play and stuff. So I guess, Ian, there's a financial regulatory reason for why 5-year might be the sweet spot.
Yeah,
but I guess you have to look at it compared to like what the sporting aspect of that.
Yeah, so essentially, Todd Bowley, the football visionary, who came and bought Chelsea, that like Billy Bean, he spotted a gap in the market, and he used his stats and his financial knowledge to come in and give a whole load of players 9-year deals. And UEFA took 2 minutes.
What are you doing?
Took like 2 minutes and went, right, that's banned. So that's one of the other reasons why they've not been buying anybody. So yes, so 5 years is the natural limit. I think amortization is a factor, but we're probably talking about, so Kuhn's, if you say he's £3 million player, you're hit for a 4-year deal versus a 5-year deal. You're kind of spreading it out. It's about 150 grand a year. So it's not massively impactful. I kind of hope, and I guess I'm choosing to look on the positive side of this, that it's actually, they're kind of protecting their asset, and actually, if they're confident that Kuhn is a player with a lot of upside, a 4-year deal means that 2 years into that, then you're into the 2-year crisis point, essentially, that we got to in the 10 season. 5 years kind of, the player knows that they're getting 5 years worth of money. So I think it's a good way to protect an investment if you're confident in it.
I think with the 5 years, as you say, you get that protection, you get that value, you get more wiggle room, and you would hope, not that Celtic are proving that, as we've talked about the last few windows, but you'd hope you aren't signing players so bad that you can't get rid of them a little bit down the line if you've signed them onto a 5-year deal and you think 2 years into it, Kwon's not the player for us. You're hoping there's someday you might be able to push them on, even at a little loss, still get them packed.
But the 5 years seems to be the standard now, though. It's not. It's But so now you've got Tilio, you've got Kwon, you've got Lagerbielke. Those 3 players are not going to make it at Celtic, and now they're all on 5-year deals.
But they're all young players. I don't see you having any problem finding a club at their level that would take them on, that they would be happy to move to get game time.
If they're on more money than the other clubs are willing to offer, they're not going to leave, and why should they? I think a 5-year as standard seems a bit daft. I
think footballers, obviously people are different, but inherently most footballers think I'm the ticket here, so I can move to another club, play games, and move on and do my thing. I don't see that being a huge problem.
At the Cynic, we record a reaction podcast to every Celtic game. On Saturday, the 21st of January, Chris was joined by Colin Kearney and Keith McGinty as we reacted to Celtic's 5-0 victory over Bucky Thistle in the Scottish Cup. Colin, what's your takeaways from this game? What can we use here to kind of look forward for the rest of the season?
Well, I'm kind of looking at it as a bounce game, but bounce game with benefits, because it actually gets us to the next round. But it was a really good run out. I think Bucky came to frustrate and play football and not just be, sort of visitors to Celtic Park. So, shout out to them and all the fans that came down. It seemed like there was a really good contingent of them. Blows the cobwebs off. We've got some big games coming on. I think actually just to chat about Vata, necessity breeds invention at times, and maybe this kind of striker free period we're in, for cover for Kyogo. Maybe that will come on to some games and maybe we'll have a revelation on our hands. So that's quite intriguing. But otherwise, yeah, just good to see Bernardo continuing to tick over and Home showing that I think that he won't be a first pick for some time, but maybe a year's time we'll be talking about what a great transfer window when we brought in all these players, because they're allowed to flourish in the shade and then come on to replace our sort of real top talent when they regrettably inevitably go. So and I just it's a clean sheet, it's 5 goals, it's a good run out, and I'm just pleased to see Celtic back for the most part.
Absolutely. Keith, yourself, what your takeaways from this match?
It was interesting at the very end of the game. You saw Rodgers going over, congratulating players, cheating and things, but when he got to Rocco Vata, he was actually going through tactics where he should be, what his movement should have been, and things like that. So I think he is someone that he feels that he can mould, but he has a lot of work to do, and maybe it's a wee switch of the mentality from the player as well, that he has to maybe put that wee bit extra effort in if there is the talent there. The intensity, I think that's the word that we were looking for, was there, and it was from the full team. They were not content just to score a couple of goals and sit back. It was right to the very end of the game that we were trying to score goals. And for those fans who had braved the weather conditions to go there today, it must have been an entertainment game to see. I should be expecting a wee bit more from this team, and I want to see, as I said at the start, I want to see a strut from this team going towards the final stages, and I want to see teams come to Celtic Park and being a wee bit more afraid of getting a doing, because I don't think we've seen that enough this year.
That was the Cynic Digest for last week, a week in which we released 7 podcasts and had 14 different contributors giving 14 different perspectives and points of view. This was a taster for our Celtic podcast content. We will be producing one of these podcasts every Tuesday, with a full Cynic Weekly podcast released every Thursday. If you would like to sign up for our extra content, please go to thecynic.co or search for The Cynic on Patreon. We are always here to answer any questions you have. You can contact us on Twitter or Instagram if you search for @90minutecynic, or email editor@thecynic.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you down the road.